Greenland has been brought up again. President Trump has renewed his interest in acquiring Greenland ever since this Venezuelan incursion. I'm curious, the rest of the world seems to be taking him very seriously on this, but one of the risks in this report is that Europe is under siege. European countries are appearing weak. What does that do for the conversation around Greenland, especially given that European leaders have said Greenland belongs to its people, it is for Denmark and Greenland, and them only to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland? Does President Trump think about that? Does that really matter to him that European leaders are against that?
You know, it's true that Europe is under siege and that they're weak, but they're not equally weak on all issues. So on Russia, the Europeans in the last year have taken on all of the funding of Ukraine's ability to defend itself. And what that means is they bought themselves a seat at the table. They bought themselves leverage. They are less FAFO on Ukraine. And that's meant that, you know, they have the ability to shape what the outcomes will and will not be. I mean, for Trump to cut off the Ukrainians now means he has to stop American companies selling weapons to Europe that the Europeans are buying and sending on at a profit, right? And for U.S. taxpayers are benefiting. U.S. taxpayers aren't paying. So Trump really doesn't have the leverage directly over the Ukrainian outcomes that he did a year ago. But on Greenland, you know, the Europeans are not particularly credible. I'll tell you, earlier today, I actually got a note from a head of state from Europe. I'm not going to say which one it is because that would be out of school, but it's a really interesting point. I'm truly worried over the EU right now. We don't fail in a realistic analysis, but in execution, due to common constitutional and domestic electoral limitations. You're quite right. There are no forces available to change Europe right now. And even though the EU is the very best we've got, the lack of sufficient credibility among Europeans and among national governments makes it slightly a catch-22. So the European leaders understand that this is a problem for them because they're not a state. The U.S. is a state with checks and balances, an independent judiciary, a federal system, right? But it's a state. China is a state that has a much stronger individual leader with even fewer checks and balances. The EU has far more checks and balances. It's harder for the EU to project power, even though they have the world's largest common market, because these governments are individual. They have different interests on, let's say, Greenland. The Nordics feel very strongly, the Southern Europeans not so much, and Trump can take advantage of that. Now, the Europeans have mostly said, not all, but mostly they've said if the Americans invade Greenland, it's the end of NATO. Trump's not going to invade Greenland. He's going to use carrots and sticks, economic and diplomacy, coercive and not, covert and overt, to try to buy, convince, cajole, pressure the Greenlanders into saying they want to be a part of the United States. That, at no point is it going to be easy for the Europeans to say, aha, that's it, NATO is over. So it's tough. It's really tough for them.